Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the disability community.
Yeah. So my husband and I own a contracting, a design build company, and we started having some requests that were coming from clients that wanted to have adaptations made to their homes, and they were specifically for different types of lived experiences that required alterations to live spaces. And we realized we didn't really understand what people really needed in order to have a really accessible home. And at the same time, the Rick Hansen Foundation was launching their brand new program called the Accessibility Certification Training Program. And so I said, hey, this looks like something that would benefit us. I was really interested in it. And so I took the training, and lo and behold, my eyes were open to a brand new part of the world that I had never really understood before. And so I ended up completely changing everything I was involved with in our company in order to start working full time in the focus of accessibility. So I actually work with our local community college here, and I train people how to assess built environments for meaningful access. And then I also have a consulting company that goes out and works with both government and public sector to help understand how to make the built environment more accessible and meaningful for everybody.
Yeah, that's cool. Because that's what I was going to ask. Like, what are some of the things that you do as an accessibility consultant and educator? What kind of things do you do in that aspect?
It's a great question. That's one of the things I love about what I get to do is it's always different and always changing. I'm very fortunate to have a mentor that has worked with me for a number of years, and he's a quadriplegic, and he's also worked in the industry for over 3 decades. So he has been absolutely vital in helping me understand how to address very unique situations. So some of the things I've done is I've done some work with Parks Canada. So they've taken me into some of their national park spaces to look at how to increase access. And so that's really just an accessibility audit of the spaces. So we go into those spaces and we think about what is it like for someone to interact in this space, regardless of different types of, based on different types of abilities. And so we think about far more than mobility. We're also thinking about people with low vision, people who have hearing loss. We're looking at all different types of memory loss and neurodivergence, anything that will affect the way somebody can interact with a space. And we identify barriers, and then we help find solutions, and we prioritize how important things are so that people know what to address first. So that's what I get to do on the consulting side. And I also work with other big organizations, such as some airports and large corporations. And then on the education side, I get to work through the Rick Hansen Foundation and our local college, training architects and engineers, draftspeople, and people in construction the principles of what real meaningful access is. So not just building code, because Laszlo, you probably know building code just doesn't work. It's not enough to
Hmm.
actually create usable spaces. So we're always asking, how can we create a truly meaningful space? So when we talk about meaningful access, we mean that people can independently and safely use that space in a dignified experience. And so those are the things that we're educating people on. So a lot of it is disability awareness training, as well as equipping them with tools that will allow them to assess and rate spaces for how accessible they are, which in turn identifies barriers that we can help people prioritize, again, like I said, with the other type of approach, and then help be part of solutions.
Yeah, that's great. So, any particular stakeholders that you're involved with in your efforts?
I get to work with so many cool stakeholders. I'm really thankful for the Rick Hansen Foundation. They are doing a phenomenal work out of British Columbia, but it really is across Canada now. And they are really increasing change everywhere and bringing awareness. One of their big campaigns has talked about everyone everywhere. And I think that's really important, that just raising awareness that we want everyone to have the opportunity to go everywhere. And so they would definitely be up there. And then just community groups. I have so many amazing individuals I get to connect with that are living this every day. And that's so important to me, is staying connected to those individuals that understand what they need in the built environment. And it's not basing it off of textbooks or opinions, but really hearing from people and individuals that live in these communities and what they really need to have in order to really experience freedom in their spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because my next question here is, how do you like go about making sure that, things are accessible for people with disabilities? What sorts of things do you have to do to make the environment, so to speak, more accessible for them?
That's a great question. And you probably have a great idea that every space is totally different, right? It really depends, but there's a lot of things that we can identify right off the get-go that tend to work best for the majority of people. One of the challenges we face when we're looking at how to determine best levels of access is we're always thinking about the broader group of the community of different types of disabilities. So if I say that somebody that has hearing loss and depends on hearing technology is going to go into a space, I already know they want to see a plush carpet that's going to dampen all that sound. They're going to want to see lots of heavy, draperies. They're going to want to see sound dampening equipment happening, because that's going to really benefit them. But then if I think about that individual that's depending on a wheeled mobility device to navigate that same space, they don't want to go into any building that has a heavy plush carpet to have to navigate over that. So when we're assessing those places, we're trying to find best solutions for everyone. So sometimes it's a compromise, sometimes it's meeting in the middle. For an example, we know that concrete floors are awful for people that have hearing technologies that they depend on, but they're fabulous for people in a wheeled mobility device. So we would say, well, let's find the shortest, tightest piled carpet we can, because we're going to get a lot of sound absorption from that. That's going to dim that echoey, overwhelming experience in a room. But then that's also going to benefit, an easier surface than a heavier carpet. So we really just work from beginning all the way through a building. So it's just as important to me when we're approaching a building to find out how people are going to arrive there on a transit system. How far do they have to go? Do they have to go in a flat area? And are there sidewalks, or are they going to have to venture out into traffic? And then we look at the parking spaces. Are they wide enough? Are they properly located? Do they have safe access onto the exterior pathways? And we look at building entrances. We want to see really generous widths with powered doors, and ease of access. One of the things that I'm sure, again, Laszlo, you would totally understand, but really helped me appreciate this, was the comparison to what it's like for any of us. We all wake up in the morning with, so to speak, a different level of energy in a bank account. And we only have so much energy that we can give in a day before we hit the bottom, and our bank account of energy is empty, right? And so if I expect somebody with a certain type of disability to come out into a public space, but it takes them 2 hours at home to get ready before they even venture out, they've just used up a lot of that energy reserve, that now they're far more depleted than somebody else that has a different lived experience. So if I take them out into the built environment, and I'm asking them to work with heavy doors and get through narrow hallways and go up steep hills, all of those things are so rapidly depleting their energy resources that they're going to have very limited ability to enjoy being out in that public space. Whereas if we remove a lot of those barriers and give people ease of access and create spaces where energy isn't required, but they can navigate more effortlessly, especially with wayfinding. We lose so much energy when we go down the wrong hallways, or when we go to the wrong building and we don't know how clearly to find something. And so that's really important too when we think about navigating for people with low vision or people who are blind, making sure there's tactile directional indications so they can follow something. Again, we're thinking about that independence. It's great if somebody wants to have help, but we want people to know that they can go somewhere and do it on their own if they want to. And so that's a lot of what we address and what we think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lastly, how can like accessibility, reduce the gaps that so many people with disabilities often face? Like how can we create an environment that is both accessible and equitable for them?
Mm. Well, now you're really talking my language because you're pulling out some of my favorite terminology that comes out of the universal design principles. And I think that to me is the answer. You know, when we talk about, you know, there's two models. We have the medical model, which says, you know, that's the person's problem. They've got to find a solution. And, you know, I really hope we're all past that. We know it still exists in a few places, but we are moving past it. I think culturally, we're seeing a really good change and a shift towards a social model. And the social model says society has to fix this. We have to address these barriers as a whole in where we see them. So when I think about how we can reduce gaps for people with disabilities, I think it's because by everybody coming on board and saying, let's be part of making this change. And so when I think about how an environment can be accessible and equitable, I think it means we use those universal design principles, which principle number one is equitable in use. And that means equal opportunity. So if there's going to be, you know, a doorway where everybody has to go in and out of a building, well, if we make that doorway a sliding sensor door, everybody has the same experience to go in and out, whether they're in a wheeled mobility device, whether they're pushing a baby stroller, whether their arms are loaded with groceries. It's going to benefit everybody, but it's going to create an equitable and accessible experience. And so those are the kinds of things. And I think it affects a lot of things with safety too. You know, when we think about low tolerance for error, which is another principle of universal design, we're thinking about how can we reduce the risks in a building. So there's so many things that we encounter, and they're just, buildings are inherently dangerous. You know, when we think about stairs, as soon as we have any form of travel vertically in a building, we know we have risks. If you have to use an elevator when you end up on a third or fourth floor and there's a fire or a fire risk, you know, all of a sudden the elevator is not an option. So do we have a plan in place to make sure we can get somebody out of that building with evacuation equipment and people that know how to use it? And the same with stairs. If we have stairs in place, you know, when we have the tactile attention indicators at the tops of those stairs, we're giving alert to people with low vision, people who are blind, that they are approaching a hazardous approach. The neat thing, though, again, when we look at this universal design principles, is we're hearing great feedback because it's benefiting everybody. We have teenagers that are and adults totally distracted on their cell phones. They have full vision, but they're not paying attention to where they're going. And if you're in a crowd moving towards stairs, if you don't have something that kind of catches your attention, you can be in a dangerous place. Same with visual fire alarms. You know, we used to say those were just beneficial for people with hearing loss, but now we're finding all these students that are using noise canceling headphones are ending up in places where, again, visual alarms when fires are happening are going to be beneficial to everyone. So those are the kinds of things I think of when I think of an accessible and equitable environment, is reducing those risks, looking at what barriers exist and how we can all be part of helping them be removed.
Mm-hmm. Those are really important points.